If we talk about ports and the waterways, they are not just economic assets alone today. They function as forward operating nodes. Suppose if we have to set our influence beyond, our peripheries, we have to go beyond, then across the Indo-Pacific maybe. I think this is one way that our ports and waterways can play a very critical role because they support our logistics. They help in refueling. And this is very critical for a sustained maritime operations also. Japan is also looking towards Andaman and Nicobar Islands, to be honest. In India, Japan, they are trying to make significant initiatives for co-developing something like some connectivity linkage for security ecosystem only in Andaman and Nicobar. So
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to our podcast series on Reimagining the Bay of Bengal, presented by Asian Confluence. And I'm your host, Neeraj. And today we are diving deep into how ports, inland waterways, and connectivity projects are shaping India's maritime strategy and its implication for the Bay of Bengal. Asian Confluence has established the Center of Bay of Bengal Studies in Shillong to promote research, dialogue, and collaboration on the region's shared future. So in this particular episode, we are exploring ports, waterways, and connectivity, the evolution of India's maritime strategy. So as always, we'll unpack this through 5 thought-provoking questions designed to spark clarity and inspire conversation. And today we are very lucky that we are joined by Dr. Ulupi Borah, who is a distinguished fellow at Center of Joint Warfare Studies. She specializes in Indo-Pacific, Japan security policies, maritime security, and critical and emerging technology, especially semiconductors. She has earned her PhD from Center for Indo-Pacific Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, with a part of her research conducted at Niigata University, Japan. Previously, she served as an assistant professor at Rashtriya Raksha University, and she has also been awarded the US mission to the UN Fellowship and JASAPO Scholarship to the Government of Japan. She is also the author of a monograph on the Russia-Ukraine war and the forthcoming book on India-Japan collaboration of a resilient Indo-Pacific. Dr. Ulupi, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manhas, for inviting me. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So, Dr. Ulupi, thank you so much for joining us. And let's, start with a very broader picture. So my first question to you that, how has India's maritime strategy evolved in the recent years, particularly in context of ports, inland waterways, and regional connectivity? Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Manhas, first of all, for inviting me. And this is going to be a very timely discussion, I believe, because we just came back from the 9th Indian Ocean Conference. And some of the very critical areas have been discussed, which is very fresh. The ideas are very critical, very important, and I'm going to highlight today on those areas in our discussion today. And since we are talking about the evolution part of our maritime strategy, this is what was exactly, our inaugural session started with by our Foreign Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. He correctly stated that today India is evolving its maritime strategy, but we are at the same time working to overcome the colonial era barriers which we faced. By this, he meant to say that we are today, India is not just focusing from a very geographical point of view, but we are focusing towards our grand strategies. Especially, we are deepening our regional cooperation, then rebuilding our economic and connectivity linkages. So this means that the maritime strategy is no longer about guarding coastlines. It is about, shaping the regional order. Another important area which I would want to highlight is our ports as strategic infrastructure. So they are not just trade nodes anymore. Today, our effort is to, create an entire ecosystem for transport, logistics, and urban infrastructure. But at the same time, these ports are going to lead the connectivity diplomacy. Today we are trying to connect with some of our very much friendly island nations, which Mauritius being one of them. At the same time, countries like Sri Lanka and Maldives also, when we talk about port infrastructure. Third point is, inland waterways. This was, inland waterways were most of the time underutilized. But today we have realized how critical their role is, especially when we talk about India's broader maritime vision. So to connect this hinterland production to coastal and global markets, is very important, because I'll tell you two, 3 points. Why? Because it reduces the logistic cost and it also enhances economic resilience. So inland waterways today has become very critical. Then another important point, which from the whole conference, what we realize is that we are speaking about everything, but all efforts become meaningless without connectivity. Connectivity is very important, especially India's approach towards it. So see, India's image in the globe is very, it's a friendly image we have, because we believe in more of transparency, and we also believe in the consultative nature. This is a direct contrast to the coercive or the opaque models which is seen elsewhere. So that is where connectivity is one of the most important pillars here. Now we are also shifting today from bilateral projects to regional connectivity networks. Say like today our focus is to link various regions, not just limited to South Asia, but Africa, Indo-Pacific. For example, which further in the discussion we'll talk about various connectivity projects with different countries, and our infrastructure and economic packages for countries like Mauritius or Sri Lanka. Another region today which India is looking towards is Africa. Now, some of the African countries were part of that conference, and like Tanzania, Mozambique, Egypt, and South Africa, the government representatives were present there, and they showed a very friendly gesture towards India's leadership in such an event or in such an initiative, and they seem to be very supportive about it. So today the aim is to create a connected Indian Ocean community. It is not just isolated partnership which we used to see before. Then one more area when we are talking about all this, maritime domain awareness today plays a very important role along with digital connectivity. So this is something new power where we already have about IFC IOR, we have in Gurugram, and so today the maritime strategy that we are talking about is now a combination of the physical, digital, and data driven. And at last, I would just like to answer to your question is that, cooperation over competition. We see competition, but what India's focus is today is not competition, but more cooperation. We came up with a framework like Mahasagar, which positions the Indian Ocean as a global common. But when you're talking about global common, there also exist shared responsibilities, so shared responsibilities in terms of energy, trade, then security, they are all interlinked. So Dr. Manhas, must have seen, we are all following the news, and we are seeing how the disruption in West Asia and the Red Sea, the cascading impacts we see in terms of energy supply shocks, trade disruption, the food security issues. They are all interconnected, and we cannot study these things in isolation, or work in isolation. So basically today India's maritime strategy, if I have to say in crisp, it integrates economic security with maritime security. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dr. Ulupi, that's a very clear overview of how India is actually integrating ports and waterways into a very larger vision. And still there is a long way to go. So now, ports and waterways are also more than just an infrastructure, because they also connect, they also bind together, all the countries together. So like my second question to you, like in terms of strategically, if we have to think, so how do ports and waterways contribute to India's broader Indo-Pacific vision and its maritime security architecture? What's your take on it?
So, Dr. Manhas, if we have to say, if we talk about ports and the waterways, they are not just economic assets alone today. They function as forward operating nodes. Suppose if we have to set our influence beyond, our peripheries, we have to go beyond, then across the Indo-Pacific maybe. I think this is one way that our ports and waterways can play a very critical role, because they support our logistics. They help in refueling, and this is very critical for a sustained maritime operations also. The second thing is, as I have mentioned about the role of MDA. Again, I'm mentioning MDA's role is critical here, because MDA, through IFC, IOR and all for data and everything, they create a network security grid across the Indian Ocean. So they enable this at the same time. Then ports also play a very critical role when we talk about humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. When we have to enable rapid deployment for HADR operations across the region, then it reinforces India's image as a very reliable security provider. Then they also help in securing the sea lanes of communications, especially in the volatile regions. So basically, when we talk about this ports and waterways, they ensure an uninterrupted energy and trade flow also, which is core to Indo-Pacific strategy. Basically, in short, I would just want to say that they are dual use infrastructure, and which has both economic and military utility at the same time whenever it is required.
Right. So that's a very strong linkage, I would say, and because showing how economic and security goal they reinforce each other, so it's a very important. And now I'll come to the Japan because Japan has also been a key partner in many of these initiatives. So I would want to ask you that how do you assess Japan's role in the development of ports and connectivity infrastructure in this region? How do you see it?
So Japan, now if I talk, Japan plays a very system shaping role, I would say, when we talk about ports and connectivity. Because if you know about Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision, these areas are their core pillars. They're talking about it, and then they have something called the PQI, which is a partnership for quality infrastructure. And Japan's PQI, they drive high standard port and connectivity. Basically, their aim is not just being specific to their surrounding waters, but they want to go beyond, say, like connecting regions like our vision, South Asia, Southeast Asia, still going towards Africa. So this is their vision, and here they include smart ports, then logistic corridors and other maritime linkages. So their main Japan's main focus is basically for critical for a resilient supply chain. As we know that Japan's trade, 99% of its trade are dependent is maritime trade, and they are very much dependent on the sea lanes of communication. So this is one of their four areas which they want to invest also on. And now, coming back towards our IPOI, Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, if you see the seventh pillar, which is trade, connectivity, and maritime transport pillar, that seventh pillar is taken by Japan. So enhancing port infrastructure and shipping network has always been a core of Japan's mission and vision. And alignment with they also align with our Mahasagar vision. Why I will tell you. During several discussions and meetings and everything with all the Japanese officials, government officials, plus their Coast Guard and Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, they always have this question that what is exactly Mahasagar? They have been reading about it, they have been trying to figure out, but they always wanted analysis from from Indian scholars or Indian experts who have been working on these areas. So they are trying to understand how is Mahasagar different from Sagar, so that they can align their visions with our approaches or with our goals. So with some interactions with a couple of Japanese scholars also, professors also, what I have realized is that somewhere or the other, our Mahasagar vision and their FOIP and their vision regarding the ports and waterways, they align mostly in terms of securing sea lanes. Then collective stewardship is one of them, rule based maritime order. So these are the areas which they are also focusing on. And another important area which I want to focus on, Japan. Today, Japan is also looking towards Andaman and Nicobar Islands, to be honest. And India, Japan, they are trying to make significant initiatives for co-developing something like some connectivity linkage for security ecosystem only in Andaman and Nicobar. So let's see how it works out. Apart from that, there are connectivity projects in Sri Lanka, also Bangladesh, Motarbari Port, Myanmar, Africa also. And Japan is also very much advanced when we talk about MDA and satellite-based tracking. These are also some areas where maybe Japan is working on and India can collaborate. Now, the last point I want to focus here is on Dr. Manhas is our trainings. MDA that I have already mentioned. MDA is the vision. We have the goal set, but how do you implement or how do you execute? So the Quad came up with something called Maitri Initiative, which is a training initiative, basically training our people, how to deal with the challenges. But one area which during my research I have figured out that Japan is very advanced in when you talk about their simulation technologies. They are all AI enabled because Japan goes to a lot of disasters, natural disasters and all. They are very much prepared. They are well prepared. So simulation based trainings are something which maybe India Japan can focus on. There is a strong potential that India Japan can co-develop a simulation center maybe under Maitri. So this is one area I see that we can cooperate, we can collaborate, and when we are talking about infrastructure, port infrastructure and waterways.
So that's a very insightful perspective on the depth of India-Japan collaboration on this part. Now we have also seen that several high-impact initiatives are also underway or in the pipeline. So I want to ask you, like, could you highlight some of the key ongoing or upcoming port and connectivity projects that are actually likely to be transformative for regional trade and integration?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of them, and because when we are talking about it, is mostly our focus has been on tourism, trade movement, economic integration. These are certain areas. So based on that, we are trying to focus on countries. So like when you're talking about tourism, maybe we can focus on Maldives, maybe we can focus on Mauritius. So already some connectivity project has been started or initiated with Maldives. They are trying to link up with multiple island nations, and basically what we are trying to do is that strengthening India's strategic presence in the central Indian Ocean also through these projects. Then second is, as I have already mentioned in about Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India Japan smart port and and the Andaman ANN projects. So this is also one area which we are focusing on, basically for high quality port infrastructure. Logistics is also one of the important part. It could be a logistic hub also. It is not always required for securing the sea lanes of communication or the choke points. Yes, that is there, but logistics also a very crucial area, because India Japan already has something called EXA agreement for logistics. So this is also one area which they are trying to look into, the Andaman and Nicobar. Then India Sri Lanka connectivity and port link infrastructure has been there. They have been working on it. Then I would just try to also focus on certain areas. Already we have Sagarmala, and Indian waterways. So their aim is not just modernize the ports, but at the same time to integrate road, rail, and inland waterways together. That integration is the focus. And so this basically, Dr. Manhas, it reduces our logistic cost also, and it connects India's, as I have mentioned about the hinterland, India's hinterland to global markets, so that we can be competitive globally. So this is one of the main focus. And apart from that, of course, I have mentioned about the Bangladesh and Myanmar also, where India Japan has been collaborating, Motorbari port. But due to certain instabilities, their political instabilities and everything in the countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar, so those projects are a little bit on hold. But at the same time, it is not out. They are there, but let's see with time how far they develop. So that remains crucial.
Okay, so those projects truly have the potential to reshape the trade flows and the integration I see. But realizing this maritime potential is also not without the obstacles. So my last question to you, that what are the major challenges that India faces in fully leveraging its maritime potential? How do you see it?
Okay, so actually, there are a couple of areas, Dr. Manhas, that we need to scale up, and we really need to work on this, because we are, investing, we are, trying our best. India is doing our best, but there are certain loopholes, I think, because of which we are not achieving. Maybe 70, 80% we are achieving, but it is not reaching to that 100%. So those areas, for example, I'll talk about. We have frameworks like Sagar, Mahasagar, IPOI. These are great initiatives. You see how the regional partners, the global partners are talking about it. They actually want to collaborate. As I have already mentioned, Japan's interest in Mahasagar. But what there is an absence of a unified maritime doctrine. Maybe we need to work on that. So if there is a lack of a single operational doctrine, then maybe we may be talking about various mission and vision and everything. But where is the execution part? So to come up with that execution part, we need something which is unified in nature, which is not fragmented, under which there are certain like guidelines, or there are certain ways to do things, certain norms to do things, that those things can be executed and implemented. So that is one area. Then Second thing is, I think more focus could be on shipbuilding and then repair and maritime manufacturing if we want to face the global competition. That is one area I would say. Then also we have very limited maritime skill when you talk about workforce. There is a shortage of skilled workforce, and port management is one of the areas, and maritime logistics. These are certain areas maybe which we can look into. Now, the most important part is undersea cables, which we are all talking about for data flow and everything. Can you imagine 95% of the global data flows through these undersea cables? Now, question arises: how much protected these undersea cables are? That is the question. Actually, to be honest, I know, to my understanding, I think they remain poorly protected, or they need more protection in that way. So I think we could look into that aspect also. Maybe a dedicated proper monitoring or a protection architecture is required. Maybe this is one area which we need to focus on. And then another most important area is today, whatever we are talking about MDA, we are talking about connectivity, we are talking about the ports. Without technology, nothing much can happen. Today, technology is an enabler, I would say. Especially when we are talking about maritime technologies, we need advanced maritime technologies. And when we talk about indigenousness and everything, we are to an extent now, we are working on it, we have started it, but we will take our own time. So limited indigenous capability, will, I don't know how far it will enable us to create those kind of maritime technologies. And at the same time, transfer of technology is not a very easy process, if you see. So what we can do, there is a midway, something like co-development or co-production. And mostly for, we need this for advanced sensors, and then underwater systems, and also for surveillance technologies. These advanced maritime technologies are very important. So, co-development, co-production is possible with some friendly nation. For example, with Japan, 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago, we have come up with this unicorn antenna mast. So these are stealth technologies, and this is a very positive initiative actually, we are expecting that our Indian Navy will be very much benefited from this radar system, because Japan is known for their stealth technologies. So something like that, not just with Japan. What I would suggest is that maybe on a large scale, co-development ecosystem can happen, with other friendly countries also, considering the strength of the other countries, who is good in which technology. So this is one area I would definitely want to focus. And last, I want to mention about, no, when we are talking about tracking, navigation, and everything, when we're talking about the maritime domain, I think satellite-based tracking is very critical. The role of commercial satellites is also important when we are tracking a particular vessel, or when we are talking about maritime intelligence. The role of space and role of satellite is immense. I think this is one area where we can focus on. When you're talking about maritime domain awareness, we can also talk about space domain awareness. We can talk about space situational awareness. So they are not fully fused. So once there is a good level of integration among these three, and, a unified operational grid is created, I think we are ready to go and ready to do great in these areas, especially in the maritime domain. So this is all, we need to, these are the areas which I feel is like, we can actually work on. Now, I'm not sure how far it is possible, but these are the areas which I felt like, we need to highlight on. That's all.
So, that's a very candid and a very practical assessment, what I believe, and, to the roads ahead. So, what's an insightful discussion, Dr. Ulupi? Thank you so much for your expert perspective on ports, waterways, and evolution of India's maritime strategy. And to our listeners, we hope this episode of Reimagining the Bay of Bengal has also deepened your understanding of how connectivity is also becoming now central to India's maritime future. So stay tuned for more discussions on the shapes, on the discussion that shape this vital region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manhas. Thank you so much.